He stood in the rain staring at a rusted cabin worth nothing, but buried behind a false wall was a vault holding $295 million in stolen treasure that powerful men had killed to protect. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The lawyer's office smelled like old coffee and older secrets. Jake Reeves sat in a cracked leather chair that had seen better decades, his work boots still caked with mud from the job site he'd left early. He was 32 years old, but the lines around his eyes told a different story. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of a man who built things for other people while his own life kept falling apart. Across from him, a tired-looking attorney named Morris shuffled papers with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. "Mr. Reeves," Morris said, not looking up, "your uncle, Thomas Reeves, passed away 6 weeks ago. As you're the sole remaining heir, his estate transfers to you." Jake shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't seen Uncle Thomas in over 15 years, not since the family falling out nobody liked to talk about. The old man had been called crazy, paranoid, a hermit who'd disappeared into the Montana mountains and never came back down. "What estate?" Jake asked. "Far as I know, Uncle Thomas didn't have anything." Morris slid a single document across the desk. "A property, cabin on 40 acres in the Bitterroot Range, about 90 miles northwest of here. Remote, no close neighbors." Jake picked up the paper and squinted at the faded property description. The address meant nothing to him. "That's it? Just a cabin?" "That's it," Morris confirmed. "No bank accounts we could locate. No vehicles registered in his name for the last 20 years. Just the land and structure." He paused, then added with something that almost sounded like pity. "The property taxes are current through next year. After that, well, that's your concern." Jake leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. A cabin in the middle of nowhere. Perfect. Just what he needed. His contracting business had gone under 8 months ago when his partner skipped town with their equipment and most of their clients. He was 3 months behind on rent for the tiny duplex he shared with his 7-year-old son, Carter. His ex-wife, Melissa, was threatening to file for full custody, claiming he couldn't provide stability. And now this. A shack in the mountains that probably had a leaking roof and a family of raccoons living in it. "Can I sell it?" Jake asked. Morris shrugged. "You can try. Remote properties like that don't move easy. Might get 5, maybe 10,000 if you're lucky. Place has been sitting empty for a while." $5,000. It wouldn't solve his problems, but it would buy him time. Maybe enough time to find steady work, get Carter into a better school district, prove to Melissa and the courts that he was fighting. "I'll take a look at it," Jake said, standing. "See if it's worth anything." Morris handed him a large envelope. "Keys are in there. Also his personal effects from the cabin, what little the county sheriff recovered. Good luck, Mr. Reeves." The handshake was brief, professional, forgettable. Jake walked out into the grey October afternoon, the envelope tucked under his arm. His truck sat in the parking lot, a 2006 Ford with a cracked windshield and a transmission that sounded like it was chewing gravel. He climbed in, tossed the envelope on the passenger seat, and sat there for a long moment. Uncle Thomas. Jake remembered him only in fragments. A tall man with a grey beard and eyes that never quite looked at you directly. He'd worked as something. Jake's father had always been vague about it. Restoration, maybe? Appraisals? Something with old things. Then one day, Thomas was gone. The family whispered about paranoia, about accusations Thomas had made, about bridges burned so thoroughly there was nothing left but ash. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Carter's school. Reminder, field trip payment due by Friday, $35. $35. Jake checked his bank account on his phone. $72.16. Payday wasn't for another week, and that check was already spent twice over. He started the truck and pulled out onto the wet street. The cabin could wait until the weekend. Right now, he had to figure out how to come up with $35 and still buy groceries. By Saturday morning, Jake was on the road before sunrise. Carter was spending the weekend with Melissa, which meant Jake had 2 days to assess the property, document anything valuable, and maybe start cleaning it out. He'd borrowed a buddy's trailer in case there was anything worth hauling back. Furniture, tools, scrap metal, anything. The drive took him north through Missoula, then west into the mountains. The highway narrowed into a two-lane road that twisted through pine forests thick enough to block out the sky. Fall had painted the aspens gold, but up here, with the clouds pressing low and heavy, everything looked grey. The turnoff was easy to miss, just a gravel road marked with a faded wooden post that had a number carved into it. 14. Jake consulted the directions Morris had written out and turned. The truck bounced over ruts and rocks, branches scraping the sides. The road climbed steadily for 3 miles before finally opening into a clearing. And there it was. The cabin sat at the base of a rocky slope, tucked against a wall of pines. It was bigger than Jake had expected, 2 stories built from rough-cut logs that had weathered to the color of old bone. The roof was corrugated metal, rusted in places but intact. The windows were covered with shutters, also rusted, latched from the inside. A stone chimney rose from one end, and a covered porch wrapped around the front. Jake killed the engine and sat staring. It looked abandoned, certainly, but it didn't look worthless. The structure was solid. The foundation was stone and mortar, no visible cracks. Someone had built this place to last. He climbed out, boots crunching on gravel. The air was thin and cold, carrying the smell of pine sap and coming snow. He could hear a creak somewhere nearby, the rush of water over stone. No other sounds. No distant highway hum, no airplane engines. Nothing but wind and water and silence so deep it felt alive. The envelope Morris had given him contained 3 keys. The first one, brass and heavy, fit the padlock on the front door. Jake turned it, felt the lock give, and pushed. The door opened with a groan that echoed through the empty valley. Inside, the air was stale but dry. Dust hung in the weak light filtering through gaps in the shutters. Jake found a light switch by the door and flipped it. Nothing. He tried another. Still nothing. "Great," he muttered. "No power." He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a large main room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel lined with dust-covered books. Furniture sat arranged like someone had just stepped out for a walk. A leather armchair, a reading lamp, a side table with a mug still sitting on it. The mug had a faded logo, Glacier National Park. Jake moved through the space slowly. The cabin was surprisingly well appointed. Hardwood floors, thick and solid, built-in bookshelves lining 2 walls, a kitchen area with a propane stove and a hand pump over the sink, stairs leading up to what must be a loft bedroom. But everything was covered in dust, and there was something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The place felt staged, preserved, like a museum exhibit. Not abandoned, but waiting. He moved to the windows and unlatched the shutters, pushing them open one by one. Grey afternoon light spilled in, and Jake got his first clear look at his inheritance. The books on the shelves were old, leather-bound, the kind you'd find in an estate sale. He pulled one down and opened it carefully. The pages were brittle, yellowed. A collection of essays by someone named Ruskin, published in 1887. He replaced it and moved to the kitchen. The cabinets held dishes, simple white porcelain. The drawers contained silverware, can openers, a neat row of cooking utensils, everything organized, everything in its place. In the main room, he noticed a roll-top desk tucked into a corner. He tried to open it, but it was locked. The second key from the envelope fit, and the desk rolled open with a smooth click. Inside were papers. Jake pulled out the first stack, receipts neatly filed by year. He flipped through them. Grocery deliveries from a town called Hamilton, dated from 2008 to 2018. Propane tank refills, a receipt for a generator repair in 2012. Nothing remarkable, nothing valuable. He dug deeper and found a small wooden box. Inside was a collection of coins, old ones, silver dollars, buffalo nickels, wheat pennies. Jake didn't know much about coins, but these looked old enough to be worth something. Maybe a couple $100 at a pawn shop. He pocketed the box and kept searching. At the back of the desk, he found a leather journal. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical. March 4th, 2017. Repaired the chimney flashing. Weather still cold. Saw tracks near the creek. Mountain lion, probably. Jake flipped forward. More entries, all mundane. Repairs, weather observations, wildlife sightings. Nothing personal. Nothing that explained why Uncle Thomas had chosen to live out here alone, cut off from everyone. He closed the journal and was about to put it back when something fell out from between the pages. A photograph, faded and creased. Jake picked it up. It showed a younger Thomas, maybe in his 40s, standing in front of a stone building. He was smiling, one hand resting on the shoulder of another man Jake didn't recognize. Both men wore suits. The background looked European, old architecture, narrow streets. Jake turned the photo over. Written in pencil, Prague, 1991, before everything changed. Before everything changed. What did that mean? Jake slipped the photo into his jacket pocket and continued exploring. The upstairs loft was sparse, just a single bed with a wool blanket, a dresser, and more books. The dresser drawers held clothes, all neatly folded, all decades out of style. Jake checked the pockets looking for wallets, documents, anything. Nothing. He was about to head back downstairs when he noticed something odd about the bookshelf in the loft. It was built into the wall, same as the ones downstairs, but this one had a gap behind it, just a thin line of shadow that didn't match the others. Jake knelt down and ran his hand along the edge of the shelf. His fingers found a seam, not a crack in the wall, a seam. Like the bookshelf wasn't attached to the wall at all, but was the wall. His heart started to beat faster. He grabbed the side of the shelf and pulled. Nothing. He pushed, still nothing. Then he tried lifting, and something clicked. The entire bookshelf swung outward on hidden hinges, smooth and silent, revealing a narrow space behind it. Jake's breath caught. He shone his phone's light into the gap. Behind the false wall was another room, small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. And against the far wall was a door. Not a wooden door, but a steel one, the kind you'd see in a bank. Heavy, industrial, with a combination dial in the center. A vault. Jake stepped through the opening, his mind racing. Why would Uncle Thomas have a vault hidden in a mountain cabin? What the hell was he hiding? He approached the steel door and tried the handle. Locked, of course. The combination dial was old but well maintained, the numbers clear, 0 through 99. Jake stood there, staring at it, his pulse hammering in his ears. He had no idea what the combination might be. It could be anything. He could call a locksmith, but that would cost money he didn't have, and besides, how would he even get one out here? He stepped back, thinking. Uncle Thomas had been paranoid, careful, but he'd also left this place to Jake. Would he have left a combination in the desk? In the journal? Jake hurried back downstairs and grabbed the journal, flipping through it again, looking for numbers, patterns, anything. Nothing obvious jumped out. He checked the desk drawers again, pulling everything out, looking for hidden compartments. Then he remembered the envelope Morris had given him. The personal effects. He'd barely looked at them. Jake dumped the contents onto the desk. There wasn't much. A wristwatch with a cracked crystal, a pocket knife, a pair of reading glasses, and a small Bible, black leather, worn soft with age. Jake picked up the Bible and opened it. The inside cover had an inscription in faded ink. To Thomas, on your confirmation, may you always walk in truth, Mother. He flipped through the pages, and something caught his eye. In the book of Psalms, certain numbers had been underlined. Not verses, just numbers in the margins, the kind that marked chapter and verse. 23, 16, 71, 42. Jake's hands started to shake. He grabbed his phone and took a photo of the page, then ran back upstairs to the hidden vault. He stood in front of the combination dial, the journal entry echoing in his mind. Before everything changed. He started turning the dial. Right to 23, left past 0 to 16, right to 71, left to 42. He held his breath and pulled the handle. It moved. The heavy door swung open with a low groan and cold air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of metal and old paper. Jake shone his light inside, and what he saw made him stumble backward, his back hitting the false wall. The vault wasn't large, maybe the size of a walk-in closet, but every inch was filled. Shelves lined 3 walls, floor to ceiling, and they were packed. Gold bars, stacked like bricks. Wooden boxes filled with coins that gleamed even in the weak light. Paintings, small ones, wrapped in protective cloth. Sculptures, some bronze, some jade. Documents in protective sleeves. Jewelry boxes. And in the center of the room, sitting on a small table, a leather ledger. Jake couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He stepped forward like a man walking through a dream, his hands reaching out to touch the nearest gold bar. It was heavy, real, stamped with markings he didn't recognize. He moved to the paintings, carefully unwrapping one. It showed a woman in medieval dress, her face serene, the colors still vibrant despite obvious age. Jake wasn't an art expert, but even he could tell this wasn't a print or a reproduction. This was the real thing. He unwrapped another. A landscape, rolling hills, a style he vaguely recognized. Impressionist, maybe? His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold his phone. He set it down on the table next to the ledger and opened the book. The first page stopped his heart. Collection Inventory, Thomas Reeves, begun January 1985. Jake turned the page. What followed was a list, meticulous, obsessive, detailed beyond anything he could have imagined. Each item was described: origin, provenance, acquisition date, estimated value, gold coins, Roman, Byzantine, medieval European, estimated value, $4,200,000, gold bullion, various sources, estimated value, $18 million. Paintings, masters both known and unknown, estimated value, $73 million. Sculptures, Asian, European, pre-Columbian, estimated value, $41 million. Jewelry, historical pieces from 6 continents, estimated value, $36 million. Documents and manuscripts, rare, some unique. Estimated value, $22 million. The list went on, page after page after page. Jake's vision started to blur. He flipped to the final page, where Uncle Thomas had written in that same precise hand. Total estimated collection value as of December 31st, 2019, $295,700,000. Jake's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor of the vault, his back against the shelves of gold, and stared at nothing. $295 million. His uncle, the crazy hermit who'd lived alone in the mountains, who'd died with no bank account, no car, nothing anyone could see, had been sitting on nearly $300 million in treasure. Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket, making him jump. He pulled it out with numb fingers. A text from Melissa. Carter wants to know if you're coming to his soccer game next Saturday. Please don't disappoint him again. He stared at the text, then at the vault around him, then back at the text. $35 for a field trip. $72 in his bank account, 3 months behind on rent, and he was sitting in a vault worth more money than he could comprehend. His first instinct was to laugh. It came out as a sob. His second instinct was terror, because as his shock started to fade, questions began flooding in. Where did Uncle Thomas get all this? How did he get it? Was any of it legal? And more importantly, did anyone else know about it? Jake stood up on shaking legs and grabbed the ledger. He needed to read it, all of it, needed to understand what he'd just inherited. Because something about this felt wrong, felt dangerous. He carried the ledger back downstairs to the main room, where the light was better. He sat in the leather armchair, dust rising around him, and started reading from the beginning. The early entries were brief, almost clinical. Item acquired from estate sale, Providence, Vermont, no questions asked. Or, purchased from private collector, anonymous transaction, currency exchange. But as Jake read deeper, the entries became more detailed, more troubling. Thomas had been acquiring pieces not through normal channels, but through underground networks. There were references to retrieval operations, to black market contacts, to items in danger of being lost permanently. And then Jake found an entry that made his blood run cold. It was dated July 7th, 1993. The syndicate knows about the Prague acquisition. They've threatened action. I've made arrangements to disappear. This collection represents more than personal wealth. These are cultural artifacts stolen by criminals, pieces of human history being sold to the highest bidder with no regard for their true value or rightful ownership. I have removed them from circulation. I have saved them, but I cannot return them without exposing myself. So I will protect them until someone else can finish what I started. Jake read the entry 3 times. Syndicate, black market, stolen artifacts. His uncle hadn't been collecting. He'd been stealing from thieves, which meant the men Uncle Thomas had stolen from, they were still out there. And if they knew about this cabin, if they'd been watching, waiting for Thomas to die. A sound outside made Jake freeze, the crack of a branch breaking under weight. He jumped up from the chair, the ledger falling to the floor. His heart hammered against his ribs. He moved to the window and peered out through the gap in the shutters. A black SUV was parked next to his truck. Brand new, expensive, completely out of place on this mountain. And standing on the porch, about to knock on the door, was a man in a dark suit who definitely wasn't a neighbor stopping by to say hello. Jake's mouth went dry. He looked back at the open vault upstairs, at the ledger on the floor, at the cabin that suddenly felt less like an inheritance and more like a trap. The man knocked. 3 hard, deliberate strikes. "Mr. Reeves," a voice called through the door. Calm, professional, cold. "My name is Victor Kane. I believe we have some things to discuss regarding your uncle's estate." Jake didn't move, didn't breathe. "I know you're in there, Mr. Reeves. Your truck is still warm, and I know you've found the vault." A pause. "We've been waiting a very long time for Thomas to die, waiting for someone to finally open that door. And now that you have, well, things are going to get very complicated for you very quickly, unless we reach an understanding." Jake's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab what he could and bolt through the back. But there was no back door, just windows. And he was on a mountain, 90 miles from anywhere, with a man who knew exactly why he was here. The knock came again. Harder this time. "Last chance to do this the easy way, Mr. Reeves. Open the door. Let's talk. Or I come in, and you really won't like what happens next." Jake looked around the cabin wildly. At the fireplace, the desk, the false wall upstairs that he hadn't bothered to close, at the $295 million that had just become his burden, his curse, and possibly his death sentence. He took a deep breath, walked to the door, and reached for the handle, because running wouldn't save him. Not anymore. The only way forward now was through whatever hell was about to walk into his life. He opened the door. The man standing on the porch was younger than his voice suggested, maybe 40, with silver-threaded dark hair slicked back from a sharp face. His suit was tailored, expensive, the kind that whispered money rather than shouted it. But it was his eyes that made Jake's stomach turn, flat, calculating, the eyes of someone who'd done terrible things and slept just fine afterward. "Mr. Reeves," Victor Kane said with a smile that never reached those dead eyes. "Thank you for being reasonable." Jake didn't move from the doorway. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you're trespassing." Kane's smile widened slightly. "Am I? Interesting. Because from where I'm standing, you're in possession of property that doesn't belong to you. Property that my employers have been tracking for over 30 years. My uncle left me this cabin legally. Everything in it is mine." "Legally," Kane repeated, savoring the word like wine. "Yes, let's talk about legality. Tell me, Mr. Reeves, when you opened that vault upstairs, and please don't insult me by pretending you didn't, did you happen to notice that not a single item in there has proper documentation? No certificates of authenticity, no legal bills of sale, nothing that would stand up in any court?" Jake's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Kane sighed, a theatrical sound of disappointment. "Your uncle was a thief, Mr. Reeves. A very talented one, I'll grant you, but a thief nonetheless. He spent decades stealing from people who had already stolen, playing Robin Hood with items worth more than most small countries. And now, all of that falls to you. He tilted his head. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Get off my property, Jake said. Or what? You'll call the police? Kane laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. Please do. I'm fascinated to hear how you'll explain the $295 million in black market goods hidden in your cabin. I'm sure the authorities will be very understanding. Jake's hand tightened on the doorframe. He wanted to slam the door in this man's face, but Kane was right. The moment Jake involved the law, he'd be confessing to possession of stolen property. He'd lose everything, probably end up in prison, and Carter would go straight to Melissa permanently. What do you want? Jake asked quietly. Now we're having a productive conversation. Kane reached into his jacket. Jake flinched and pulled out a business card. My employers are willing to purchase certain items from the collection. Fair market value, cash, no questions asked. You walk away with enough money to solve all your problems, we recover what was taken from us, and everyone goes home happy. Jake looked at the card without taking it. It was simple, elegant. Victor Kane, private acquisitions. A phone number, nothing else. And if I say no? Kane's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then things become unfortunate. Accidents happen in these mountains, Mr. Reeves. People disappear, cabins burn down. And 7-year-old boys, Carter, isn't it? Well, they need their fathers, don't they? Would be a shame if something happened to you and he ended up all alone. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Jake felt rage surge through him, hot and blinding. His fists clenched. He wanted to grab this smug bastard by his expensive tie and throw him off the porch. But Kane saw it coming. He stepped back slightly, and Jake noticed for the first time the bulge under his jacket. A gun. Don't, Kane said softly. I'm here to make a business proposition, not to hurt you. But I will if you make me. Think about your son, Mr. Reeves. Think about what's best for him. Jake forced himself to breathe, to think. He was outmatched. No weapon, no backup, 90 miles from help. And this man knew about Carter, knew where Jake lived, knew everything. I need time, Jake said, to go through the inventory, to understand what I have. Kane studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Reasonable. You have 48 hours. Go through the collection, make a list. Then call me, and we'll discuss terms. He placed the card on the porch railing. But Mr. Reeves, don't do anything stupid. Don't try to move the items. Don't contact any authorities. Don't think you can run with this. My employers have resources you cannot imagine. They've waited 30 years for Thomas to die. They can be patient a little longer, but only a little. He turned and walked back to the black SUV. Jake watched him drive away, the vehicle disappearing down the gravel road like a shark sliding back into deep water. Only when the sound of the engine had completely faded did Jake let himself collapse against the doorframe. His legs were shaking. His hands were shaking. His entire body felt like it had been dipped in ice water. He looked down at the business card, still sitting on the railing. Then he picked it up, walked inside, and locked the door behind him. For a long time, Jake just sat in the leather armchair, staring at nothing. His mind raced in circles, trying to find a way out, but every path seemed blocked. If he went to the police, he'd be arrested. If he tried to sell the items legally, questions would be asked he couldn't answer. If he did nothing, Kane would come back, and next time he wouldn't be making polite conversation. And if he ran, if he tried to disappear with Carter, where would they go? How would they live? Men like Kane didn't just give up. They hunted. Jake picked up Uncle Thomas's ledger from the floor and started reading again, more carefully this time. There had to be something here, some clue about what Thomas had planned, how he'd survived 30 years with this target on his back. The entries chronicled a life lived in shadows. Thomas had been careful, methodical, paranoid. He'd changed his location frequently in the early years, using different names, different identities. But eventually, around 2003, the entries mentioned this cabin. He'd bought it under a shell corporation, hidden the property behind layers of legal paperwork that would take months to unravel. And then Thomas had simply vanished into the mountains. No phone, no internet, supplies delivered to a P.O. box in Hamilton, cash only. No paper trail, no digital footprint, nothing. It had worked. For 17 years, Thomas had lived here untouched, but he'd also lived alone, cut off, waiting. For what? For someone to pass this burden to? Jake turned to the final entries, the ones from 2019, just months before Thomas's death. The handwriting was shakier, the entries shorter. November 23rd, 2019. Health failing. Won't make it through another winter. Have amended my will. Jacob will inherit. He doesn't know me, but I know him. Watched from afar. He has a good heart like his mother. He'll do what's right. Jake's throat tightened. Thomas had been watching him. For how long? The next entry answered that question. Jacob's business failed. Not his fault. His partner betrayed him. He's struggling now, but he fights for his son. Reminds me of myself before I became what I became. He deserves a chance to do what I couldn't. The ledger will explain everything. The letters will guide him. I pray he's stronger than I was. Letters? What letters? Jake jumped up and ran back upstairs to the vault. He'd been so overwhelmed by the gold and art that he hadn't looked carefully at everything. Now he searched more systematically, pulling out boxes, checking labels. On the bottom shelf, tucked behind a stack of gold coins, he found a metal document case. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, each labeled with a date. Open first. Open when you decide. Open if they find you. Jake's hands trembled as he broke the seal on the first envelope. Inside was a letter, several pages long, written in Thomas's precise handwriting. Jacob, if you're reading this, then you've found the vault, and you're probably terrified. I'm sorry. I never wanted to burden you with this, but I had no choice. Let me explain everything. In 1983, I was working as an art restoration specialist in New York. I was good at my job, respected, making a comfortable living. Then I was approached by a man named Dmitry Volkov. He offered me a fortune to restore several pieces that had unclear provenance. I should have walked away. Instead, I took the job. What I didn't know was that Volkov ran a black market syndicate trafficking in stolen cultural artifacts. Items stolen from museums during wars, pieces looted from archaeological sites, art seized by totalitarian regimes. They moved millions of dollars in stolen history, selling to wealthy collectors who asked no questions. I restored those pieces, and then I couldn't unknow what I knew. I'd seen items that had been reported missing for decades. A Renaissance painting stolen from a Polish museum in 1944. Byzantine coins looted from Turkey, pre-Columbian gold taken from Peru. Each piece represented a theft not just of property, but of cultural heritage. I told myself I was just a craftsman doing a job. But I wasn't. I was helping criminals erase history. In 1985, I made a decision. I would steal from the thieves, not for profit, but for preservation. Every item I could get my hands on, I would save. I would keep them safe until I could find a way to return them to where they belonged. For 8 years, I worked for Volkov while secretly diverting pieces. I was careful. I took items they thought were destroyed or lost in transit. I built false identities, created elaborate paper trails that led nowhere, and I accumulated what you found in this vault. But in 1993, they discovered what I'd done. Prague was supposed to be my last job, a major acquisition from a corrupt government official. But someone talked. They came for me. I barely escaped with my life. I've been hiding ever since. I came here to Montana, to this cabin, and I've waited. I always planned to find a way to return these items properly, to work with legitimate museums and governments. But I was a coward. I was afraid that any contact with the outside world would bring Volkov's people down on me. So I waited, and now I'm dying, and the burden passes to you. Here's what you need to know. Not everything in that vault is stolen. Some pieces I acquired legally over the years as investments. Those items are marked in the ledger with a star. They're yours, free and clear, worth approximately $40 million. Enough to change your life. The rest, the vast majority, needs to go back. Each piece has documentation in the vault, provenance research I conducted over decades. I've identified rightful owners, or at least countries of origin, for almost everything. But you can't just call the police or the FBI. Volkov's syndicate has corrupted officials in multiple countries. If you go through normal channels, the items will simply disappear back into the black market, and you'll disappear too. There is one person you can trust. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chen. She works for the Art Recovery International Foundation in Boston. I've never contacted her, but I've followed her career. She's built her reputation on recovering stolen art and returning it to rightful owners. She can't be bought, can't be intimidated. If anyone can help you do this right, it's her. The second envelope contains her contact information and a letter of introduction explaining everything. Open it when you're ready to act. The third envelope contains emergency instructions if Volkov's people find you before you can act. I pray you never need to open it. Jacob, I know this is overwhelming. I know you didn't ask for this, but you have a choice I never had. You can do the right thing from the beginning. You can return stolen history to the people it belongs to. You can be the hero I was too afraid to be, or you can take the 40 million that's legally yours and walk away. Hide the rest, seal up the vault, pretend you never found it. I won't judge you either way. You have a son to protect. That matters more than anything. Whatever you decide, know that I chose you because I believe in you. I've watched you fight for Carter, watched you try to build something honest even when the world kept knocking you down. That's the kind of man who deserves a second chance. I'm sorry I couldn't give you this in person. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but I'm not sorry that you're the one who found this. Do better than I did. Your Uncle Thomas. Jake read the letter 3 times, tears blurring his vision by the end. Thomas had been watching him, had seen him struggle, had seen him fail and keep fighting anyway, had thought Jake was worthy of this impossible choice. He looked around the vault at the fortune surrounding him. $40 million marked with stars in the ledger. Legally his. Enough to pay every debt, buy a house, put Carter through college, never worry about money again. All he had to do was ignore the other $255 million in stolen artifacts. Seal the vault. Walk away. It would be so easy. Jake sat on the floor of the vault, the letter in his lap, and thought about Carter. About taking him to soccer games and not having to check his bank account first. About Melissa's smug expression when she filed custody papers versus the look on her face when Jake showed up with proof of financial stability. About never again having to choose between groceries and field trip fees. $40 million. Freedom. But he also thought about what Thomas had written. Cultural heritage. History. Rightful owners. These weren't just valuable objects. They were pieces of human civilization, stolen from people who had every right to their own past. Jake had grown up poor, but his mother had taken him to museums when she could. He remembered standing in front of a painting of a woman in blue, something by Vermeer, and his mother explaining how old it was, how many centuries this single image had survived. The weight of that time, that continuity, had felt sacred. And somewhere out there, museums had empty spaces where these items belonged. Countries had holes in their history. People had lost connections to their ancestors because men like Volkov trafficked in stolen memory. Could Jake really just keep that locked away? Even if he didn't profit from it, even if he just left it hidden, wasn't that its own kind of theft? He pulled out the second envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet with contact information for Dr. Sarah Chen, plus a longer letter meant for her eyes, explaining everything Thomas had done. Jake read it twice, committing the details to memory. Dr. Chen worked in Boston. Thomas had included her office number, her email, even her cell phone, and a note. She answers her own phone. She'll listen. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Jake stood up, legs stiff from sitting on the cold floor. He walked back downstairs and looked at Victor Kane's business card, still sitting on the desk where he'd tossed it. 48 hours. That's what Kane had given him. Jake had a choice to make. He could call Kane, negotiate a deal, take some money, and hope these people left him alone afterward. He could call Dr. Chen and try to do the right thing, risking everything. Or he could grab the 40 million in legal items, load up his truck, and run. He picked up his phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then he opened the browser and searched for Dr. Sarah Chen Art Recovery International Foundation. Her profile appeared immediately. A woman in her 40s, Korean American, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Her bio listed an impressive resume: PhD in art history from Yale, former FBI art crime team consultant, director of the Art Recovery International Foundation since 2012. Articles about her work recovering Nazi-looted art, artifacts stolen during the Iraq War, pieces taken from indigenous communities. She was exactly what Thomas had promised, incorruptible. Jake looked at the time. 6:47 p.m. on a Saturday. She wouldn't be in her office. But Thomas had included her cell number for a reason. His finger hovered over the screen. This was it, the moment the decision became real. Once he made this call, there was no going back. Kane's people would find out. Things would get dangerous, possibly deadly. But if he didn't make this call, if he took the easy way out, he'd spend the rest of his life knowing he'd chosen comfort over conscience. And what would he tell Carter when his son was old enough to ask where the money came from? Jake pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He was about to hang up when a woman's voice answered, slightly out of breath. "This is Sarah Chen." Jake's mouth went dry. "Dr. Chen, my name is Jake Reeves. You don't know me, but my uncle was Thomas Reeves. He died 6 weeks ago and left me a property in Montana. I found something here, something you need to know about." There was a pause. "Go on." "A vault, hidden behind a false wall. It's full of art, artifacts, gold, documents. My uncle left a letter saying it's all stolen black market items he took from a syndicate over 30 years ago. He said you were the only person who could help me return it all properly." The silence on the other end stretched so long Jake thought she'd hung up. Then, "How much are we talking about?" Jake swallowed. His ledger estimates total value at $295 million. He heard her sharp intake of breath. "Jesus. And you're sure it's real?" "I'm looking at it right now. Renaissance paintings, Asian sculptures, pre-Columbian gold. It's real." "Have you contacted authorities?" "No. My uncle's letter said not to, that the syndicate has people inside law enforcement. And there's more." Jake took a breath. "They already found me. A man named Victor Kane showed up an hour ago. Said his employers want to purchase items from the collection. Gave me 48 hours to decide." "Kane." Dr. Chen's voice went hard. "Victor Kane works for the Volkov organization. They're one of the most sophisticated black market networks in the world. Mr. Reeves, you're in serious danger." "I know. Then why are you calling me instead of running?" Jake looked around the cabin, at the dust-covered books, at the chair where his uncle had sat alone for 17 years. "Because running doesn't solve anything. This stuff needs to go back to where it belongs. My uncle spent his whole life afraid to do the right thing. I don't want to make the same mistake." Another pause. Then Dr. Chen said, "Okay, listen carefully. Don't touch anything else in that vault. Don't let anyone in the cabin. Don't tell anyone else about this. Not friends, not family, nobody. I'm going to make some calls. There are people I trust, people who can help, but this is going to take time to set up properly." "How much time?" "A few days, maybe a week. Can you hold out that long?" Jake thought about Kane's 48-hour deadline. "I don't know. Kane wants an answer Monday." "Then you'll have to stall him. Tell him you need more time to inventory everything. Be cooperative but slow. Make him think you're going to play ball." "And if he doesn't buy it?" Dr. Chen's voice was steady, calm. "Then you get out. Take your son and disappear until I can put protection in place. Your life is worth more than any artifact, no matter how significant." Jake felt something loosen in his chest. She wasn't asking him to be a hero. She was giving him permission to survive. "Okay," he said, "I can do that." "Good. I'm going to send you a secure email address. Use only that to contact me. Don't call this number again unless it's an emergency. And Mr. Reeves, what you're doing, it's brave. But it's also very, very dangerous. If you want to change your mind, I'll understand. I'm not changing my mind, Jake said. Then I'll be in touch soon. And Jake, lock your doors. The call ended. Jake stood in the empty cabin, the silence pressing in around him. He'd done it. He'd committed to the hardest path, the dangerous path. He walked to the windows and checked the shutters, making sure they were secure. Then he went to the door and checked the lock. It was old, probably wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it was something. His phone buzzed. An email from an address that was just a string of random numbers and letters. Inside was a single line. I've begun reaching out to contacts. Sit tight. Delete this after reading. SC. Jake deleted it and sat back down in the leather armchair. Outside, night was falling fast. The mountains went dark, the pines turning into black silhouettes against a purple sky. Jake had never felt so alone, so exposed. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photo of Carter on his lock screen. His son, grinning gap-toothed after losing his first tooth, holding up a dollar bill from the tooth fairy. I'm doing this for you, Jake whispered to the photo. So you can grow up in a world where people do the right thing, even when it's hard. He checked the time. 7:18 p.m. Carter would be getting ready for bed at Melissa's house. She'd read him a story, tuck him in, kiss his forehead. Normal, safe, routine. Jake wanted to call to hear his son's voice, but what would he say? Hey buddy, Daddy found a fortune in stolen art and is probably going to get killed by international criminals. Sleep tight. No. He'd call tomorrow. Tell Carter he loved him. Make plans for next weekend, a normal weekend, the kind where the biggest worry was whether to get pizza or burgers, if he lived that long. Jake settled deeper into the chair and opened Uncle Thomas's ledger again. If he was going to do this, he needed to understand exactly what he was protecting. Each item had a story, a history. These weren't just objects. They were bridges to the past. Proof that human beings had created beauty even in the darkest times. He read about a Byzantine icon, stolen from a monastery in Greece in 1942 during the Nazi occupation. About a Mayan jade mask, looted from a tomb in Guatemala in the 1960s. About a Renaissance painting taken from a Polish museum in 1944, thought lost in the war, but actually sold on the black market by Soviet soldiers. Each theft was a wound in the historical record. Each missing piece left a community or country incomplete, cut off from its own heritage, and his uncle had saved them. Hidden them away, yes, but saved them from being sold off to wealthy collectors who'd lock them in private vaults where no one would ever see them again. Now it was Jake's turn to finish the job, to do what Thomas couldn't. He just had to survive long enough to make it happen. Outside, something moved in the darkness. Jake froze, listening. It could be an animal, deer or elk, common in these mountains. But it could also be Kane's people, watching, making sure Jake didn't try to run. He turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and moved to the window. He peered through a gap in the shutters, scanning the tree line. Nothing. Just shadows and starlight. But the hair on the back of his neck stood up anyway. Someone was out there. He could feel it. Jake backed away from the window and checked his phone. No signal. He'd had a few bars earlier, but now nothing. The mountains played hell with cell reception, and depending on the weather, sometimes it just vanished. He was completely isolated. No way to call for help if something went wrong. Jake made a decision. He couldn't stay here tonight. Not alone, not vulnerable. He'd drive back to Missoula, spend the night in a motel, come back tomorrow in daylight. Kane had given him 48 hours. That meant he had until Monday, time enough to make a plan. He grabbed Thomas's ledger and the letters, stuffed them into his jacket. Then he hesitated. Should he take some of the portable items? The coins maybe, or some of the smaller pieces? If something happened to the cabin, if it burned or was raided, at least he'd have proof of what had been here. No, Dr. Chen had said not to touch anything, better to follow her instructions. Jake locked the vault, swung the false wall back into place, and went downstairs. He did one more circuit of the cabin, checking windows, making sure everything was secure. Then he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. He opened it and stopped cold. Victor Kane was standing on the porch, exactly where he'd stood hours earlier. But this time he wasn't alone. 2 more men flanked him, big guys in tactical gear, the kind of men who got paid to hurt people. "Going somewhere, Mr. Reeves?" Kane asked, that dead smile back on his face. Jake's hand tightened on the doorframe. "I told you I need time to inventory." "And I believed you," Kane said. "For about an hour. Then I had one of my associates run a background check. Very thorough. Turns out you made a phone call shortly after I left, to a Dr. Sarah Chen in Boston. Now why would you do that, I wonder?" Jake's blood turned to ice. They'd been monitoring him somehow. Tapped his phone? Listening device in the cabin? He'd been so careful, but not careful enough. "She's an appraiser," Jake lied. "I wanted a professional opinion on value before negotiating." Kane laughed, genuinely amused. "Oh, Mr. Reeves, you're a terrible liar. Dr. Chen doesn't do appraisals. She recovers stolen art, which means you've decided to be a hero." His expression hardened. "That was a mistake." The 2 men stepped forward, and Jake saw they had weapons drawn. Not guns, something worse, tasers. "Here's what's going to happen," Kane said. "You're going to take us to the vault. You're going to open it. We're going to remove certain high-priority items, and then you're going to forget any of this ever happened. If you cooperate, you get to walk away with a nice consolation prize. If you don't—" He shrugged. "Well, accidents happen in the mountains." Jake looked past them at his truck, 30 feet away. He could run for it, maybe make it. But they had tasers. They'd drop him before he got halfway. He was trapped, outgunned. And whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just his fate, but the fate of $295 million in stolen history. And the fate of his son, who might grow up without a father if Jake made the wrong choice right now. He took a breath and made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," Jake said, stepping back. "The vault's upstairs." Jake led the 3 men into the cabin, his mind racing faster than his heart. Every step felt like walking toward an execution, but he forced himself to stay calm, to think. Kane and his men didn't know the layout. They didn't know Uncle Thomas's secrets. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. "Upstairs," Jake said, gesturing to the loft. They climbed the narrow staircase, boots heavy on the old wood. Jake's hands were steady as he reached the bookshelf, but inside, every nerve was screaming. He touched the hidden latch, and the false wall swung open. Kane's eyes widened. Even through his professional composure, Jake saw genuine surprise. 30 years, Kane murmured. 30 years Volkov's been looking for this room, and here it is. Thomas really was as good as they said. Jake moved to the vault door and began turning the combination dial. His fingers trembled slightly on the cold metal. 23, 16, 71, 42. The lock clicked. Jake pulled the handle, and the heavy door swung open. All 3 men stepped forward, drawn by the gleam of gold and the promise of fortune. For just a moment, their attention was completely on the vault's contents, not on Jake. It was the moment he'd been waiting for. Jake's hand shot out and grabbed the vault door, slamming it closed with all his strength. The heavy steel door caught one of the tactical guys square in the face, sending him sprawling backward with a grunt of pain. Jake spun and shoved the bookshelf with everything he had. The false wall swung closed just as Kane lunged forward. His shoulder hit the bookshelf, but Jake was already moving, throwing his weight against it, wedging it shut. "You stupid!" Kane's curse was cut off as Jake grabbed the loft support beam and pulled himself up onto the railing. Uncle Thomas had been paranoid. Jake had thought so when he first explored the cabin, but now he understood. This place had been built with escape routes. Jake jumped from the loft railing, grabbed the chandelier chain, old, iron, strong, and swung toward the main room. Behind him, he heard the false wall crash open as Kane's men forced their way through. Jake hit the ground running. He grabbed the leather armchair and heaved it into the path of the stairs just as boots thundered down. One man tripped, crashing hard. The other vaulted over. Jake was already at the front door. He yanked it open and sprinted into the night. The mountain air hit him like a slap. Cold, thin, sharp. His truck was 30 feet away, keys in his pocket. But Kane's SUV was parked right behind it, blocking the exit. Jake veered left instead, toward the tree line. Behind him, the cabin door banged open and voices shouted. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, searching. He crashed into the forest, branches whipping his face, roots grabbing at his feet. He'd grown up in these mountains, had spent childhood summers hiking with his father before the man died. The darkness didn't scare him. It was an ally. Behind him, the flashlight beams multiplied. 3, then 4. They were all coming. Jake ran uphill, lungs burning in the thin air. His boots found purchase on pine needles and stone. He knew where he was going now. There was an old fire road that curved around the mountain, used by rangers during peak season. If he could reach it, he could follow it down to the highway, maybe flag down a passing car. A taser discharge crackled somewhere to his right. They were firing blind, hoping to get lucky. Jake dove behind a boulder and pressed himself flat. The beam of light swept past, missing him by inches. He counted to 3, then moved again, angling upward. His thighs burned. His breath came in ragged gasps. But he kept moving. Then his foot found nothing but air. Jake pitched forward, tumbling down a steep embankment he hadn't seen in the darkness. Rocks and roots battered him. He threw his arms up to protect his head, rolled, hit a tree trunk hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. He lay there for a moment, stunned, every inch of his body screaming. Above him, the flashlight beams swept back and forth. Voices called out, coordinating their search. Jake forced himself to move. His left ankle throbbed, sprained, maybe broken, but he couldn't stop. He crawled forward, found his feet, limped toward what looked like deeper darkness ahead. It was a creek bed, the same one he'd heard earlier. The water was shallow, but ice cold, snow melt from higher elevations. Jake splashed into it, letting the water wash away his scent in case they brought dogs. He followed the creek downstream, moving as quietly as he could manage. The water numbed his ankle, which helped with the pain but made his movements clumsy. Twice he slipped on moss-covered stones. Once he went down completely, soaking himself to the chest. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the flashlight beams finally fell behind. Jake pulled himself out of the creek and collapsed on the bank, shivering violently. His jacket was soaked. His teeth chattered so hard he bit his tongue. But he was alive. And more importantly, he still had Uncle Thomas's ledger stuffed inside his jacket, protected by a plastic sleeve he'd grabbed at the last second. Jake pulled out his phone. Still no signal. The screen showed 12% battery. He turned it off to conserve power. He needed to think. Kane and his men would search the mountain tonight, but come morning they'd realize he'd escaped. Then what? Would they go after Carter? Use his son as leverage? The thought sent ice through Jake's veins that had nothing to do with the creek water. He had to warn Melissa, had to get Carter somewhere safe. But first, he needed to survive the night and get off this mountain. Jake forced himself to stand. His ankle screamed in protest, but it held his weight. Not broken then, just badly sprained. He could work with that. He oriented himself by the stars. His father had taught him that too, and started limping east. The highway was that direction, maybe 5 or 6 miles as the crow flew. Through forest, over rough terrain, in the dark with a bad ankle, it might take him all night. But he'd make it. For Carter, he'd crawl if he had to. The night was endless. Jake lost track of time as he pushed through the forest, using tree branches as crutches, stopping every few minutes to listen for pursuit. The temperature dropped steadily. His wet clothes clung to him like ice. His hands went numb, then his feet. He knew the signs of hypothermia, confusion, drowsiness, the temptation to just lie down and rest. He kept moving. Sometime around what must have been 3 or 4 in the morning, Jake stumbled out of the tree line onto a gravel road. The fire road he'd been aiming for. He could have wept with relief. He turned downhill and started walking, each step slightly easier on the even surface. The sky to the east was just beginning to lighten. that deep purple that comes before dawn. Jake heard the engine before he saw the headlights. A vehicle coming up the road toward him. For a second, he thought about hiding. What if it was Kane's people? But his body made the decision for him. He was too cold, too exhausted to run anymore. He stood in the middle of the road, arms raised, squinting against the approaching headlights. The vehicle slowed, stopped. An old Jeep, Forest Service green. A ranger stepped out, a woman in her 50s with grey-streaked hair and a concerned expression. "Jesus, son, what happened to you?" she asked, rushing forward. "Accident," Jake managed through chattering teeth. "Got lost hiking. Need to get to a phone." She didn't question it. Rangers had seen enough lost hikers to know the drill. She wrapped an emergency blanket around his shoulders and helped him into the Jeep. The heater was blasting. Jake nearly cried at the warmth. "Ranger station's about 40 minutes from here," she said, pulling back onto the road. "We'll get you warmed up, check that ankle, and call someone to come get you." "My phone," Jake said. "Need to make a call. Emergency." She handed him her cell phone. "Go ahead." Jake's fingers were so numb he could barely hold it, but he managed to dial Melissa's number. It rang 4 times before she answered, voice thick with sleep. "Hello?" "Melissa, it's Jake. Don't hang up. This is about Carter." "Jake? It's 4:30 in the morning. What?" "Listen to me," Jake cut her off, keeping his voice low so the ranger wouldn't hear everything. "Something's happened. I need you to take Carter and go stay with your sister in Spokane. Today. Right now." "What? Jake, what are you talking about?" "I can't explain. But I need you to trust me. Take Carter somewhere safe. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not your friends, not your parents, nobody. Just go." There was a long pause. Then, in a different voice, one that meant she was actually listening. "Are you in trouble?" "Yes, but I'm handling it. I just need to know Carter's safe while I do." Another pause. Jake held his breath. Melissa could be difficult, but she'd never put Carter at risk. She knew Jake wouldn't make a request like this unless it was serious. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll leave in an hour, but Jake, you better call me and explain everything as soon as you can. And if this is some kind of custody game, it's not. I swear, just keep him safe." He hung up and handed the phone back to the ranger, relief washing through him. Carter would be okay. Kane couldn't use him as leverage now, which meant Jake was free to fight back. The ranger station was small, just a single-story building with a garage attached. The ranger, her name tag said K. Morrison, got Jake settled in a chair by the wood stove and brought him coffee that tasted like heaven. She examined his ankle with practiced efficiency. "Sprained, not broken," she confirmed. "You're lucky. I'll wrap it, but you need to see a doctor and stay off it for at least a week." "Thanks," Jake said. "Can I use your phone again? I need to call someone in Boston." She raised an eyebrow but handed it over. "Must be some emergency." Jake dialed the number Dr. Chen had given him. It rang twice before she picked up, alert despite the early hour. "Chen." "Dr. Chen, it's Jake Reeves. We have a problem." He explained everything quickly. Kane's arrival, the confrontation, his escape. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting. "You did the right thing running," she said when he finished. "But now we need to move fast. Kane will assume you're going to the authorities. He'll try to clean out that vault before anyone can stop him." "Can we stop him? Get police to the cabin?" "Not fast enough, and not without tipping off whoever Volkov has on his payroll inside law enforcement." She paused. "But I know someone who can help. His name is Marcus Webb. Former FBI, now works private security for high-value art recovery. He's based in Seattle. I can have him in Montana by this afternoon with a team." "What kind of team?" "The kind that specializes in securing stolen property from dangerous people. Ex-military, all legitimate, all clean. They'll secure the cabin, document everything in the vault, and establish a legal chain of custody that will hold up in court." Jake closed his eyes. "This is really happening, isn't it? I found a fortune in stolen art and now I'm in the middle of an international black market war." "Yes," Dr. Chen said simply. "But you're not alone anymore. Where are you now?" Jake looked around. Ranger Station. Morrison Creek District, I think. Stay there. I'll coordinate with Webb and local authorities I know are clean. Do not go back to that cabin. Do not contact Kane. Just sit tight and let the professionals handle this.
What about my uncle's ledger? I have it with me. All his documentation.
Guard it with your life. That ledger is proof of provenance for hundreds of items. Without it, this becomes much harder. Can you get somewhere secure until Webb arrives? Jake thought. Yeah, there's a motel in Hamilton. I can hole up there. Perfect. I'll text you Webb's contact information. He'll reach out within the hour. And Jake, what you did tonight, running instead of letting them take those artifacts that took guts. Your uncle would be proud. The call ended. Jake sat by the wood stove, sipping coffee, feeling the warmth slowly return to his body. Ranger Morrison came back with a first aid kit and wrapped his ankle in a proper compression bandage. You want to tell me what you're really mixed up in? She asked as she worked. I've been doing this job 23 years. I know the difference between a lost hiker and someone running from trouble. Jake met her eyes. She had kind eyes, intelligent eyes, the eyes of someone who'd seen enough of life to understand complexity. If I tell you, you might not believe me, he said. Try me. So he did. Not everything. He left out specifics about the vault's contents. But enough. His uncle's death, the cabin, discovering something valuable, dangerous men coming after him. Ranger Morrison listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she sat back. Your uncle was Thomas Reeves, the hermit up on Bitterroot. Jake nodded. I met him a few times over the years. Quiet man, always polite. Paid his fire prevention fees on time. She smiled slightly. He reported a trespasser about 8 years ago. Some guy in a suit asking questions, poking around the property line. I drove up there to check it out, but the guy was gone by the time I arrived. Thomas said he thought someone was casing the place, looking for a way in. That was probably Volkov's people, Jake said. They've been searching for decades. Morrison nodded slowly. Well, if you're telling the truth, and I think you are, then you need more help than I can give you. But I can do this. I'll file a report about finding you injured on the mountain. That creates a paper trail, something official that might help later. And if anyone comes around asking if I've seen you, I'll tell them no. Thank you, Jake said, meaning it. Don't thank me yet. Men like you described, they don't give up easy. Watch your back. By 8 a.m., Jake was checked into the Mountain View Motel in Hamilton, a place that had seen better decades but was clean and, most importantly, anonymous. He paid cash for 3 nights and locked himself in room 12. His phone had died during the night. He plugged it in and waited for it to charge enough to turn on. While he waited, he carefully spread out Uncle Thomas's ledger on the bed and started photographing every page with the motel's disposable camera he'd bought from the front desk. Old school but untraceable. His phone finally powered on. Immediately it buzzed with messages. 3 from Melissa, confirming she and Carter were on the road. 2 from a number he didn't recognize. He opened those first. Mr. Reeves, this is Marcus Webb. Dr. Chen hired me to assist with your situation. I'm en route from Seattle with a team of 4. ETA Hamilton is 1400 hours. Text me your location when you receive this. The second message. Also, Dr. Chen forwarded me images of your uncle's ledger pages. I've shared them with contacts at Interpol and the FBI Art Crime Team. What you found is even bigger than Dr. Chen initially thought. We're talking about items that have been on recovery lists for decades. This is going to make international news. Be prepared. Jake sat down hard on the bed. International news. He'd wanted to do the right thing, but he hadn't really processed what that meant. His face would be everywhere. His story would be dissected. Carter would see it all. His phone rang. Unknown number. Jake answered cautiously. Hello? Mr. Reeves. Victor Kane's voice was cold, controlled fury. You've made things very difficult. I'm going to give you one chance to fix this. Tell me where you are right now, and we can still work something out. How did you get this number? I have resources. Now answer the question. Jake's hand tightened on the phone. Go to hell. Bold words for a man whose son lives at 427 Maple Street in Missoula. Carter, isn't it? 7 years old, attends Paxson Elementary. His mother just pulled him out of school unexpectedly this morning. Very suspicious. Should I send someone to find out where they went? Jake's vision went red. You stay away from my son. Then cooperate. The vault is mine, Mr. Reeves. Volkov has been patient for 30 years. We won't wait any longer. You have until noon to contact me with your location. After that, I start looking for Carter. The line went dead. Jake stared at the phone, rage and fear warring in his chest. Kane was bluffing. He had to be. Melissa and Carter were already on the road, going somewhere Kane couldn't find them. But what if he wasn't bluffing? What if Volkov's reach was as long as Kane claimed? Jake immediately called Melissa. She answered on the first ring. Jake, what's going on? I had to pull Carter out of school without explaining anything. He's scared. Where are you right now? About an hour outside Spokane. We're stopping for breakfast. Good. Listen carefully. Change your destination. Don't go to your sister's. Go somewhere else, somewhere random. A hotel in a city you've never visited. Use cash, don't use credit cards. And don't tell me where you are. Just text me every few hours that you're safe. Jake, you're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry, but this is serious. The people I'm dealing with, they threatened Carter. I don't think they can actually find you, but I need to be sure. He heard her sharp intake of breath. Someone threatened our son? Yes, but I'm handling it. I have help coming, professional help. Just stay hidden for a few more days until this is resolved. There was a long pause, then, okay. But Jake, when this is over, you owe me the full story, everything. You'll get it, I promise. After he hung up, Jake texted Marcus Webb his location at the motel. Then he sat on the bed, Uncle Thomas's ledger open in front of him, and tried to think. Kane had given him until noon. That was 4 hours. Webb wouldn't arrive until 2 p.m., 2 hours too late. But Jake had an idea. A risky, probably stupid idea, but an idea nonetheless. He grabbed the motel notepad and started writing. At 11:45 a.m., Jake stood in the parking lot of the Mountain View Motel, leaning on a cane Ranger Morrison had given him. His ankle was tightly wrapped, pumped full of ibuprofen, and held together by sheer stubbornness. He'd texted Kane 10 minutes ago. Meet me at the motel, we'll talk. Now he waited. The parking lot was visible from the road. No surprises, no ambushes, just open space and daylight. The black SUV pulled in at exactly noon. Kane stepped out, alone this time, though Jake was sure there were others nearby. The man looked tired, angry, like he'd spent the night combing the mountain. Mr. Reeves, Kane said, walking over, I'm glad you've come to your senses. I haven't, Jake said, but I'm willing to make a deal. Kane's eyes narrowed. What kind of deal? Jake pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it over. It was a single page photocopied from the ledger. This is one page from my uncle's inventory. 327 pages total. Every item documented. Provenance, acquisition details, estimated values. Everything you'd need to know what's in that vault and how to sell it. Kane studied the page, his expression unreadable. And I'll give you the ledger, all of it. In exchange, you leave me and my family alone, forever. You get the documentation you need, I get my life back. What about the vault contents? Take whatever you want, I don't care. I just want this to be over. Kane folded the page slowly. You expect me to believe you're just giving up? After running? After calling Dr. Chen? After everything? I expect you to believe I'm a father who wants to protect his son, Jake said. Carter means more to me than stolen art. You win. Take the ledger, take the stuff, leave us alone. For a long moment, Kane said nothing. He studied Jake's face, looking for the lie, the trap. Then he smiled. You know what, Mr. Reeves? I believe you. You're not a hero. You're just a scared father in over his head. That's the truth, isn't it? Jake didn't answer. Fine, Kane said. Give me the ledger. I'll take it and the vault contents, and you'll never see me again. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out the leather-bound book, his uncle's life work. 327 pages of documentation. the key to everything. He held it out. Kane took it, flipped through a few pages to verify it was real, then nodded. Smart choice. Now go back to your miserable little life and forget any of this happened. He turned to walk away. Just one thing, Jake called out. Kane stopped, looked back. That ledger you're holding? It's not the original, it's a copy I made last night. A good copy, but still a copy. Kane's expression darkened. What? The original is already with the FBI art crime team. So are photographs of every page, and so are the coordinates to the vault, which is currently being secured by a private security team working with international authorities. By the time you get back to the cabin, it'll be too late. Kane's hand moved toward his jacket, toward the gun Jake knew was there. I wouldn't, Jake said, louder now. Because this parking lot is being watched by 8 different people with cameras, and if anything happens to me, every piece of evidence about you, about Volkov, about the black market operation, goes straight to Interpol. On cue, Marcus Webb stepped out of the motel office, followed by 3 more people in tactical gear, not pointing weapons, just standing there, visible, professional, ready. Kane looked around, jaw tight. You're making a very big mistake. No, Jake said. My uncle made the mistake by hiding instead of fighting. I'm finishing what he should have done 30 years ago. Those artifacts are going back to their rightful owners, and you're going to prison. For a second, Jake thought Kane might actually draw his weapon, might decide dying in a shootout was better than facing justice. But then the man's shoulders sagged slightly, and Jake saw something in his eyes. Defeat. Volkov won't let this go, Kane said quietly. You understand that? This isn't over. Maybe not, Jake replied. But today, right now, it is for you. Webb walked forward, pulling out a badge. Victor Kane, I'm Marcus Webb, working with the FBI on behalf of the Art Recovery International Foundation. You're going to come with us and answer some questions about your involvement in the trafficking of stolen cultural artifacts. Kane didn't resist as Webb's team moved in. He just looked at Jake one last time and said, Your uncle lived in fear for 30 years. Now you will too. Congratulations. Then they took him away. Jake stood alone in the parking lot as the SUVs departed, his legs suddenly weak. He sat down on the curb, head in his hands, and let the adrenaline drain out of him like poison from a wound. It was over. At least this part. There would be more to come. Depositions, trials, media attention, all of it. But Carter was safe. The artifacts were secure. And the truth was finally coming out. A hand touched his shoulder. Jake looked up to see Marcus Webb standing over him, a slight smile on his weathered face. That was either very brave or very stupid, Webb said. I'm not sure which. Both, probably, Jake admitted. Well, it worked. Kane's in custody, and we've got a team at the cabin securing everything. Dr. Chen's already coordinating with museums in 12 countries. This is going to be the biggest art recovery in modern history. Webb sat down next to him. Your uncle would be proud. Hell, I'm proud, and I just met you. Jake pulled out his phone and looked at the screensaver again. Carter's gap-toothed smile. I just want to get back to being a dad, fix some houses, coach Little League, normal stuff. You'll get there, Webb said. But first, we've got a lot of work to do. You ready? Jake stood up, his ankle protesting but holding. He looked at the mountains in the distance, at the sky stretching blue and endless overhead, and thought about Uncle Thomas spending 30 years up there alone, afraid to finish what he'd started. Jake wasn't going to make that mistake. Yeah, he said, I'm ready. 6 months had passed since the day Jake stood in that parking lot and watched Victor Kane be taken into custody. 6 months that felt like 6 years, packed with depositions, interviews, authentication processes, and the kind of media attention that made Jake understand why his uncle had chosen to disappear into the mountains. But today, standing in the Grand Hall of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., watching curators carefully unpack a Byzantine icon that had been missing since 1942, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: pride. Mr. Reeves, a voice said behind him. He turned to find Dr. Sarah Chen, immaculate in a navy suit, extending her hand. They'd spoken dozens of times over the phone and video calls, but this was only their second meeting in person. "They're almost ready for you." Jake tugged at his tie. He'd bought the suit 3 days ago, his first suit ever, and it still felt like a costume. "I don't know what to say to all these people." "Tell them the truth," Dr. Chen said simply. "That's all anyone wants to hear." The press conference was being held in the museum's main auditorium. Over 200 journalists had gathered, along with representatives from museums, governments, and cultural heritage organizations from around the world. The story had been building for months. The hermit who'd stolen from thieves, the nephew who'd finished what his uncle started, and the $295 million in recovered artifacts that were finally going home. Jake walked onto the stage, flanked by Dr. Chen and Marcus Webb. The camera flashes were blinding. He sat down at the table, a microphone in front of him, and looked out at the sea of faces. A moderator from the Smithsonian stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, 6 months ago, Jake Reeves inherited what he thought was a worthless cabin in rural Montana. What he discovered changed the landscape of art recovery forever. Today, we're here to announce the successful repatriation of over 300 items valued at approximately $295 million. Mr. Reeves, would you like to make a statement?" Jake leaned toward the microphone. His prepared speech sat in front of him, 3 pages carefully written by a publicist Dr. Chen had hired. He glanced at it, then pushed it aside. "My uncle Thomas Reeves spent 30 years hiding from the world," Jake began, his voice steadier than he expected. "He lived alone in a cabin because he was afraid of the criminals he'd stolen from. Afraid that if he tried to do the right thing, he'd be killed, and maybe he would have been. I'll never know." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What I do know is that fear kept him from finishing something important. It kept hundreds of pieces of human history locked away where they couldn't be seen, couldn't be studied, couldn't connect people to their past. When I found that vault, I had a choice. I could keep the secret like he did, take what was legal and pretend the rest didn't exist. Or I could risk everything to do what my uncle couldn't." Jake looked directly at the cameras. "I'm not a hero. I'm a contractor from Montana who was broke and desperate. I thought about taking the easy way out, but then I thought about my son, Carter. What kind of man did I want him to see when he looked at me? What kind of example did I want to set?" His voice caught slightly. "These artifacts, they're not just valuable objects, they're pieces of people's heritage. A painting stolen from Poland during World War II belongs to the Polish people. A sculpture looted from a temple in Cambodia belongs in Cambodia. Gold coins taken from a Greek monastery belong to Greece. My uncle understood that. He saved these items from being sold to private collectors who'd lock them away forever. He just couldn't take the last step and give them back." Jake leaned back slightly. "So that's what we did. Dr. Chen, Marcus Webb, and teams from dozens of countries have spent the last 6 months authenticating, documenting, and preparing these items to return home. And today I'm here to say they're going home, all of them." The room erupted in questions. Hands shot up, voices overlapped. The moderator tried to restore order, but it was chaos for a solid minute. Finally, one voice cut through. "Mr. Reeves, isn't it true that some items in the collection were legally acquired? That you could have kept approximately $40 million worth of artifacts?" Jake nodded. "Yes, my uncle's documentation showed that some pieces were purchased legally over the years. By law, those belonged to me, but I donated them as well. The money never felt right. It came from the same world as the stolen pieces, even if it was technically legal." "So you gave up $40 million, another reporter called out. "I gave up money that would have come with a lifetime of questions," Jake corrected. "Every time I looked at my son, I would have wondered if he respected me for the choice I made or just for the money I had. I chose respect." Dr. Chen leaned toward her microphone. "If I may add, Mr. Reeves has established the Thomas Reeves Foundation for Cultural Heritage Protection. Any rewards or restitution he receives from governments for the return of their property will go into that foundation, which will work to prevent future trafficking of stolen artifacts." The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Jake answered as best he could, sometimes deferring to Dr. Chen or Webb when the questions got technical. But mostly, he just told the truth. About finding the vault. About being threatened. About choosing his son's future over his own immediate comfort. When it finally ended, Jake walked off the stage feeling drained but lighter somehow, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying since that first night in the cabin. In a private room backstage, Carter was waiting with Melissa. His son ran to him immediately, wrapping his arms around Jake's waist. "You were on TV, Dad. Everyone at school is going to see." Jake knelt down, ignoring the protests from his still healing ankle. "Is that okay with you, having everyone know about this?" Carter nodded enthusiastically. "Are you kidding? My dad is like Indiana Jones, except you didn't keep the treasure." "No," Jake said, smiling. "I gave it back to the people it belonged to." "That's even cooler," Carter said seriously. "Miss Peterson said that's what real heroes do." Jake pulled his son into a tight hug, his eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall. Over Carter's shoulder, he saw Melissa watching them. Her expression was complicated. Pride mixed with something else, maybe regret. She walked over. "That was a good thing you did up there. I didn't understand it at first, why you'd turn down that much money. But I get it now." "Yeah? Yeah. Carter's watching everything you do, learning what it means to be a man from how you handle this. You're teaching him that some things matter more than money." She paused. "I'm sorry I didn't see that before. When you lost the business, when things got hard, I thought you'd given up. But you never did. You just kept fighting." Jake didn't know what to say to that. Their divorce had been bitter, full of accusations and hurt feelings. This moment of understanding felt fragile, precious. "I'm trying," he said finally. "That's all I can do." Melissa nodded. "Well, try to have him back by 6 on Sunday. We're having dinner at my parents'." She smiled slightly. "They want to meet the famous Jake Reeves." After they left, Dr. Chen found Jake in the hallway. "There's someone who wants to meet you. She flew in from Poland specifically for today." She led him to a small conference room where an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair, a younger woman standing behind her. The older woman had white hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had seen too much history. "Mr. Reeves," Dr. Chen said, "this is Anna Kowalski. The painting your uncle recovered, the Renaissance Madonna, it was stolen from her family's estate in 1944 by Nazi officers. She was 7 years old when it happened." Jake's breath caught. He walked forward slowly and knelt beside the wheelchair. "Mrs. Kowalski, I'm honored to meet you." The woman reached out with a trembling hand and touched his face. Her eyes filled with tears. "My father died believing that painting was lost forever. He told me stories about it, about how it had hung in our family's chapel for 300 years. Every generation of our family had prayed before it." Her accent was thick, her English careful. "I thought I would die without seeing it again. But you gave it back." "My uncle saved it," Jake said. "I just finished what he started." "No," Mrs. Kowalski said firmly. "Your uncle hid it. You returned it. There is a difference. One is fear, one is courage." She pulled Jake closer and whispered, "Thank you for letting an old woman see her history one more time before she dies." Jake couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They fell freely as this woman, who'd lost so much, thanked him for giving back a piece of what had been stolen. The younger woman, Anna's granddaughter, touched Jake's shoulder. "The painting will hang in the National Museum in Warsaw, but we're commissioning a small replica for our home, so Grandma can see it every day." After they left, Jake stood in the empty conference room for a long time. Dr. Chen found him there, staring out the window at the Washington Monument. "There are 47 more stories like Anna's," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Families who lost their heritage to war, to theft, to greed. And in the next year, as we continue repatriating items, you're going to meet many of them. Are you ready for that?" Jake wiped his eyes. "I don't know. Is anyone ready to see that much grief and gratitude at the same time?" "No," Dr. Chen admitted, "but you'll do it anyway, because that's who you are." The following weeks were a blur. Jake traveled to Greece to present the Byzantine coins to the monastery they'd been stolen from. The monks wept openly, singing prayers of thanksgiving. In Cambodia, he watched as a stone sculpture was returned to a temple, and an entire village gathered to witness it being placed back in its original position. An elder touched the stone and said it was like welcoming home a lost child. In Peru, Jake helped archaeologists reinstall pre-Columbian gold pieces in a museum that had empty displays for decades, the labels reading stolen 1978. Now those labels could be removed. Each return was emotional, overwhelming, humbling. Jake began to understand what his uncle had protected. These weren't just objects, they were connections. They were proof that beauty and history could survive even the darkest human impulses. But the returns also brought danger. The Volkov syndicate might have lost Victor Kane, but they hadn't disappeared. Twice, Jake received threatening messages. Once, someone broke into his motel room in Athens and left a note. "This isn't over." Marcus Webb assigned a security detail, 2 former Special Forces operators who stuck to Jake like shadows. It was suffocating, but necessary. Interpol had arrested 17 people connected to the Volkov operation, but the man himself, Dmitry Volkov, remained at large, operating from somewhere in Eastern Europe where extradition was a fantasy. "He's old," Webb told Jake during a secure call. 78 years old and dying of cancer, but he's still dangerous. He sees your actions as a personal insult. The art world is small, and he spent 50 years building his reputation. You destroyed it in 6 months. "So what do I do?" Jake asked. "You keep living your life, you keep doing the work, and you trust that men like Volkov eventually run out of road." By the time fall arrived, Jake was back in Montana. He'd leased a small office in Missoula for the Thomas Reeves Foundation, hired 2 staff members to handle the administrative work, and slowly, carefully, started to rebuild something resembling a normal life. He picked up Carter every Wednesday and every other weekend. They went fishing, played catch, built a treehouse in the backyard of the house Jake had finally been able to rent. Nothing fancy, just 3 bedrooms and a yard, but it was theirs. Carter never asked about the money Jake had given up. He just seemed happy to have his dad back, present and focused instead of stressed and distant. One Saturday afternoon, Jake was working on the treehouse when a car pulled up. He tensed. Even now, unexpected visitors made him nervous, but relaxed when he saw the Montana State Police logo. A trooper stepped out, young, professional. "Mr. Reeves, I have something for you." He handed Jake an envelope. Inside was a letter from the State Department and a check. Jake stared at it, not quite believing the number. $7,300,000. "What is this?" "Reward money," the trooper explained. "The governments of Poland, Greece, Cambodia, Peru, and 6 others pooled funds as thanks for the return of their cultural property. The State Department processed it. It's yours, sir, legally and completely." After the trooper left, Jake sat on the porch steps, the check in his hands. $7 million. Not the $40 million he could have claimed, but still more money than he'd ever imagined having. He thought about what it could buy. A real house, not rented. College fund for Carter, fully paid. A new truck. Hell, a new business. Security for life. But he also thought about Anna Kowalski's tears, about the monks singing their prayers, about the Cambodian elder saying the sculpture was like a lost child coming home. Jake pulled out his phone and called Dr. Chen. "I need you to help me do something," he said when she answered. "What's that?" "Set up the foundation properly. I want to donate most of this reward money. Keep enough to buy a modest house and put some away for Carter's education. The rest goes to work preventing what happened to these artifacts from happening to others." There was a pause. Then Dr. Chen said, "Jake, you don't have to do that. You've done enough. This money is your reward for doing the right thing." "I know," Jake said, "but the right thing isn't a one-time choice. It's something you keep doing. My uncle taught me that, even if he didn't mean to." "How much are you thinking of donating?" Jake looked at the check again. $5 million. That should be enough to fund the foundation for years, maybe hire more staff, support other recovery efforts. You're serious. Completely. Dr. Chen laughed, a sound of pure delight. Then let's do it. And Jake? Your uncle would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. The Foundation's launch was small, just a gathering at the Missoula Community Center with local press and some of the people who'd helped Jake through the chaos. Ranger Morrison was there, smiling in her dress uniform. Marcus Webb flew in from Seattle. Dr. Chen gave a speech about the importance of protecting cultural heritage. But the moment that mattered most to Jake came when Carter tugged on his sleeve and asked, "Dad, can I say something?" Jake lifted him onto the small stage. Carter grabbed the microphone with both hands and said in his clear 7-year-old voice, "My dad found treasure and gave it back because it wasn't his. He says that's what you do when something belongs to someone else, even if you want to keep it, even if it would make your life easier. You give it back because it's the right thing." He looked at Jake. "I'm proud of you, Dad." The room applauded. Jake pulled his son into a hug, his eyes burning again. This, Carter's respect, his understanding, this was worth more than any amount of gold or art. That night, after everyone had gone home and Carter was asleep in his new bedroom in their new house, Jake drove up to the cabin. He hadn't been back since the day Kane had confronted him. The property was technically still his, though it had been sealed for months during the investigation. Now, with everything resolved, he had the keys again. Jake walked through the empty cabin, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The vault had been cleaned out completely, every item catalogued and removed. The false wall stood open, permanent now, no longer hiding anything. He climbed to the loft and sat where Uncle Thomas must have sat hundreds of times, looking out over the valley. The stars were brilliant up here, away from city lights. The creek still murmured in the distance. Jake pulled out a letter he'd written, one he'd never sent because there was no address to send it to. It was addressed to Uncle Thomas. "Dear Uncle Thomas," he read aloud to the empty cabin. "I finished what you started. The artifacts are going home. The people who stole them are facing justice. And I finally understand why you did what you did. Not the hiding part, but the saving part. You saw something worth protecting, and you protected it the only way you knew how." He paused, looking up at the stars. "I wish you'd trusted someone sooner. You didn't have to carry this alone for 30 years. But I get it now. Sometimes the weight of doing the right thing feels too heavy to share. You're afraid people won't understand, or worse, that they'll try to stop you." Jake folded the letter and placed it on the windowsill, weighed down with a stone. "I'm not going to hide like you did. I'm going to keep fighting for this, out in the open, even when it's scary, because Carter's watching. And I want him to see that his dad doesn't run from hard things. That doing right matters more than being comfortable." He stood and walked back downstairs, taking one last look at the cabin. He'd decided to donate it to the National Park Service, turn it into a small museum about art recovery and cultural heritage protection. Let people see where this story started. Let them understand that one person's courage, or in Thomas's case, one person's fear overcome by a nephew's determination, could change the world. As Jake drove back down the mountain, his phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen. "Poland confirmed. The Madonna will be unveiled at the National Museum next month. Anna Kowalski wants you there. She says you're family now." Jake smiled. Family. He'd gained so much in the last 6 months. Not money, though there was some. Not fame, though that had come too. But connection, purpose, the knowledge that his life meant something beyond just surviving day to day. He thought about Carter asleep in their new house, about the foundation that would continue this work long after Jake was gone, about the hundreds of artifacts now home where they belonged. And he thought about Uncle Thomas, finally at rest, his burden lifted, his mission completed. Jake pulled into his driveway and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the modest house with its porch light glowing warm. Through the window, he could see the treehouse they'd built together, the one Carter had decorated with hand-painted signs, "No bad guys allowed" and "Heroes only." This was worth more than $295 million. This was worth everything. Jake got out of the truck and walked inside, locking the door behind him. He checked on Carter, who was sprawled across his bed, one arm hanging off the side, completely peaceful. Jake pulled the blanket up and kissed his son's forehead. "I did it," he whispered. "I did the right thing, and we're okay." In the kitchen, he made coffee and sat at the table, looking through the Foundation's plans for the next year. There was so much work to do, more artifacts to track down, more families to reunite with their heritage, more thieves to stop. But for the first time in his adult life, Jake wasn't worried about money, wasn't stressed about survival. He had enough. Not excessive wealth, just enough. And that was a kind of freedom he'd never experienced before. His phone rang. Late call, unusual. He answered carefully. "Hello?" "Mr. Reeves," an accented voice, old, rough with age and illness. "My name is Dmitry Volkov." Jake's blood went cold. "How did you get this number?" "I have resources even now. I'm calling because I wanted to tell you something before I die. And yes, I am dying. Cancer. Perhaps 3 months left." Jake said nothing, his mind racing. "You destroyed 30 years of my work," Volkov continued. "Took away items worth hundreds of millions. Sent my people to prison. Ruined my reputation." He paused. "And I want to thank you." "What?" Volkov coughed, a wet, painful sound. "I am 78 years old, Mr. Reeves. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have owned masterpieces that kings would envy. And I have accomplished nothing, nothing that matters, nothing that will be remembered except as crimes." Another pause. "But you gave those pieces back. You returned them to places where people will see them, learn from them, connect with their ancestors through them. That is legacy. That is something that matters." "Why are you telling me this?" Jake asked. "Because I want you to know that you won. Not because you stopped me, but because you proved I was wrong. I spent 50 years believing that power came from possession, that whoever owned the most beautiful things was the most important. You proved that power comes from letting go, from giving others what belongs to them." Volkov's voice grew softer. "That is a lesson I learned too late, but perhaps my admission will help someone else learn it sooner." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Do not look for me, Mr. Reeves. I will be dead before you could find me anyway. This is my confession and my surrender. Use it however you wish." The call ended. Jake sat in his kitchen, the phone still in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. The most wanted art trafficker in the world had just called to admit defeat. To acknowledge that Jake's path was better than his, he immediately called Marcus Webb and recounted the conversation. Webb listened without interrupting. "We'll trace the call," Webb said when Jake finished. "But I suspect Volkov covered his tracks, and honestly, if he's telling the truth about having 3 months left, he's probably in a hospice somewhere under a false name. We might never find him." "Does it matter?" Jake asked. "If he's dying anyway?" "For the record, yes. For justice, yes. But for you, maybe not. He surrendered in his own way. That might be enough." After hanging up, Jake poured his coffee and stepped onto the back porch. The autumn air was cool, crisp. In a few weeks, the first snow would fall. Carter would want to build a snowman. They'd drink hot chocolate and watch movies, normal father-son things. And somewhere in Poland, an old woman would stand in front of a painting that had been lost for 79 years. In Cambodia, villagers would pray before a sculpture that had come home. In Greece, monks would preserve coins that had survived centuries of theft and recovery. All because one man had chosen to save instead of sell, and because his nephew had chosen to finish what he'd started, no matter the cost. Jake looked up at the stars, the same stars his uncle had looked at for 17 years from that cabin in the mountains. "We did it, Uncle Thomas, together, even though we never met. We did something that matters." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and snow and possibility. And in that moment, standing on his porch with coffee in his hand and his son sleeping safely inside, Jake Reeves understood something profound. Anyone can inherit a fortune. But it takes courage to inherit a burden, carry it honorably, and transform it into something meaningful. It takes strength to choose the hard right over the easy wrong. And it takes wisdom to understand that the greatest wealth isn't what you keep, but what you give away. His uncle had saved pieces of history. Jake had given them back. And together, across the gap of death and time, they had proven that one person's conscience can echo across the world and change it forever. Because sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't gold or art or money. Sometimes it's the chance to do better than those who came before, to stand at the crossroads of right and wrong and choose right, even when it costs everything. That was Uncle Thomas's true gift. Not the vault or its contents, but the opportunity to be better, to be brave, to matter. And Jake had taken that gift and honored it the only way that counted, by passing it forward to his son, to the families who received their heritage back, to a world that desperately needed to remember that integrity still existed. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories that will move you. Click to keep discovering what happens when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that doing the right thing always matters, even when it costs everything.